I am on too. Hey, good to see
Hey,
you, man. How are
how's
you?
it? I'm doing well. I'm fired up. I'm getting caught up on my email. Nothing's greater than a cleared inbox, I'll tell you.
It never ends, man. It never ends. Emails keep coming. And then do you do this where you save them because you want to respond to them later? And the next thing you know, you've forgotten about them. And now it's 2 weeks later and you forgot to respond because you were saving them to respond at a better time.
I do. I'm really bad at text because I always feel like people texting me are trying to cut in line. I got
You've
40
never been
email.
a good texter.
Why do you think you get priority over the five people I haven't responded to from last week?
It's true.
That's kind of the, but
I've
it
noticed
is
that
what it
ever
is.
since I've known you, you were a terrible texter. You've gotten better over the years with me. I've appreciated that. But for the most part, I do
Yeah.
love it. I'm in a church context where I've got people in their 70s and 80s that text me. And I love that. You want to get a hold of me
Yeah.
quick, text me. So this
I
is an
here's
episode of OTX NT. It's not about texting us. Um, Andrew, what are we talking about today?
I thought, we're a little late to the game, but it's not that big of a thing because it's still horrible. And that was the Olympic ceremonies and the just abject paganism that we saw. And now that people are through it, people kind of got all upset about it on the front end and then forgot about it, watched the Olympics, and now it's over. I do think it's time now that the dust has settled a little bit to maybe just talk about that in light of a biblical worldview. Why are we upset? Why should we be upset, or should we not? So that's where we're headed today, I think. What do you think?
I think that's exactly what you have to say. I think this is what we want to talk about. Let's do it.
All right, well, let's pray and dive in. Join me, if you will, in the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever and ever. Amen.
Amen. All right.
All
So,
right.
how do you want to start with? What do you think? You want to
I
start with
think
the opening?
the opening, the truth is I was kind of busy and I was coming off vacation and I didn't watch it real time. I just saw the kind of response. And then it just seemed to be so horrible that I really didn't want to feed that to my soul. So I didn't want to watch it. But the thing I did see was some really disturbing images. And then I thought the thing that was really kind of the highlight of the blasphemy was the portrayal of the Lord's Supper
Yeah.
by just this kind of transgendered thing feasting on some blue guy. And this is something that
Well, the blue guy was
bothered
what's
a lot of
supposed to be
people.
like Dionysus. Isn't that who's he's supposed to be?
Was it Dionysus? Because
I
that
think
fits
it was.
perfectly.
That's what I
Yeah,
thought. I'm gonna double
yeah,
check because that was what I first thought. It was like Bacchus or Dionysus or something at the Olympics. So
yeah. Which of course, if you jump into ancient religions, we're talking about just absolute fulfillment, gratitude of every desire, and of course, why not? So I thought that the Christian community was genuinely outraged and rightfully so. What did you think? Do you think that this is no big deal, and isn't this just beautiful expression of um,
look, yeah. So I think it was like, why on earth would you specifically target Christians? I will say this. Here's my one thought. There is nothing there is nothing particularly holy to me about Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper. So, you know, I don't care about his painting. That's not the Bible. It's a depiction. I feel like the Last Supper was dragged through the mud with Da Vinci Code and all that kind of garbage that they were trying to figure out in the painting and all that. So, whatever. It's whatever. And but it was a very clear. Here is the Lord. Here is the Last Supper, and we're gonna put, and it is, they've confirmed, or at least other people said, there was Dionysus, and he is he's one of the Greek gods of. I mean, that's what you want to party and you want to fool around. That's who you are now. Which, by the way, captures really the essence of our culture. We haven't done this yet. Where is it? I think I got my book in the bag. Maybe I don't. Oh, I do have the book in my bag. I finally almost finished this. Uh,
oh yeah.
The Return of the Gods by Jonathan Cahn. I actually thought it was really interesting. that I mean, the whole argument of this is he looks and says, we as the West have just welcomed the gods, the pagan gods of the Canaanites. And I think he makes a good point in that, especially if you believe that these are real dark beings, that we are truly like bringing in the spirit of the age with them. But yeah, I think yeah, it was very clear imagery that we go from, hey, here's the Christian word, but we're going to totally change that and put alphabet people in there very particularly in there, and then also put in Dionysus as well, and then put in drag and all that kind of stuff. Like it was very targeted at Christians.
Yeah.
Like I said, I don't care so much that it was Da Vinci's painting, because that's not in and of itself, but
Yeah.
all the imagery of that piece was definitely problematic. And I absolutely hated it.
Yeah, it's something, and of course, the whole thing leading up to it was strange references, demonic type imagery. It was just very, very, very odd, right? And I listening to Al Mohler and others just over the years, the idea of transgression and the kind of strategic way of moving a society is to transgress something that is very offensive, and then you back up a couple of steps, but you take 4 or 5 steps forward, you apologize, but you're further and further down the road. And this kind of approach, what happens is you just start running out of things to transgress. At some point in time, nobody's that offended, and so you have to get more and more radical. And I think we're seeing that because there's just no real, it doesn't even make sense. It's just trying to be very provocative. And it is okay in our Western culture to really be offending Christians, but it's not so okay to offend others, right? And I think that's always an interesting double standard. But the goal is to move away from any Christian root towards whatever is the leading edge of this new secular world that we're carving. My favorite line was, though, that the organizers apologized to anyone who was offended by the tableau that evoked Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper, but defended the concept. We're sorry if you were offended. The greatest non-apology of all time. What's so crazy too is our society is built upon victimization and being offended on somebody else's behalf, right? We need to change the name of football teams because somebody's offended on behalf of a Native American, even when the Chiefs are saying, no, we like the name. And so we have to change these names because somebody might be offended or can imagine offending somebody someday. But if you're offending Christians, hey, that's okay. That's the group that's all right to offend. And so obviously they knew what they were doing. And I think it's interesting because to me, it showed the attempt to compromise with the moving secular world leads to this type of situation where you have no foundation with which to be upset. And feel free to jump in, but my thought here is,
keep talking, man.
Why would we be offended, right? So Jesus is replaced by an icon of the alphabet community, and instead of the body and blood of Christ being given through his self-sacrifice for the salvation of others, now we have Dionysus, the great god of sexual whatever, right? Drunkenness and debauchery. And in fact, what's interesting about Dionysus is that the way that you would worship him often in these cultures, these ancient mystery religions, was a lot of alcohol and a lot of music, almost kind of a rave type situation, where the hope was that the god would actually possess you, enthusiasmos, possess you, and then live out the god's debauchery and desires through your body with those present. And you look at this and say, oh my goodness, was this ceremony an invitation for demonic possession? That's the kind of thing. It's really dangerous. But the other thing is, if you just think that Christianity needs to just love everybody and there's no hard lines, why are you offended? Could not Jesus be depicted living through the alphabet community there, who are, after all, just living out their own desires that, of course, they could not suppress? That's who they are. And you start saying, you guys have been trying to push us to recognize, hey, there's value side A, side B, that we can learn from people who are engaging in this type of lifestyle, even if they'll go ahead and be abstinent. Christian churches that are moving this way will never be accepted by the secular community. What they're saying is jump in and go all the way. And it really is a warning in my mind. Those that are trying to compromise on these issues, they would not be in their position 10 years ago. And they just keep getting pulled further and further along. And I just, when I saw it, I said, oh, this will be the He Gets Us commercial in 5 years.
Yeah.
Jesus ate with alphabet soup. He gets us, right? All right, I'll let it.
Well, I mean, you look at that, even the imagery, right? She's got her little heart hands there at the table. And that's really is. We have made our culture, it was Romans 1 on display. And it's our culture which has elevated sex. It's elevated our approach to everything else, our feelings, our morals, our standards, our truths, right? Like that's what the greatest good is. And so we define love accordingly, what we think love should be. And that's what you see playing out here is this imagery is to them, this is pushing people to say, you're not really loving because you don't affirm and love like we love. And all of that. And then it's not just here's the table. Then it's this, let's also bring in the party gods, right? And the kind of eros kind of love that we're talking about. And so that to me is you just see, it doesn't stop with, we need to expand your love definition. It goes way deeper, and it then takes a very pagan turn of it needs to include all these other things, which is so like to come back and bring this book up. Some of that could be considered. I mean, some of those are like, these are these rituals that are being done very publicly for that reason, right? That we're also inviting these spirits, these things back in to our culture and our world that way. I mean, that's what I would think. I mean, but here's the other thing. So let's talk about a couple other things I thought were interesting. So first off, Olympics, if you look at like what everybody got, right? I mean, obviously everyone's complaining. I don't know if you saw, like everybody got the hard cardboard beds, all the Olympic athletes, but like with that, they give a ton of condoms with every athlete because it's a huge just mix up of people there at the Olympic, headquarters or whatever it's called, the village. And so that's already part of that culture and that world. And they're just putting it on display now of like, this is who we are as the Olympia, at least the West is. The West wants to go that way. They've been captivated by that. What was also really peculiar to me is within that ceremony is what's the significance of this horse? I don't know if you saw that too. Did you see the horse riding? And it's like, I don't know. I mean, everybody wants to pick and choose, but there is some weirdness of like, it does look like you've got death or like Grim Reaper kind of a look riding on this horse. And is that the same? Are they, it to me seemed like they're picking images on purpose. And this is not just like, hey, what if we just like, and not like a Jackson Pollock, let's throw stuff at the wall and see if it looks good. But like, let's put the Last Supper. Let's replace the characters with this. Let's put Dionysus here. Let's put this dark horse with a rider who's got, probably looking at Revelation 6, right? The pale horse with the rider named Death. Hades follows after him. Like, what is that all about, right? What are they trying to symbolize in all of that? Are they trying to symbolize that, hey, we're ushering in? Like, that's what I want to know is the meaning behind it. Are they just reflecting that this is the death of when we start with the supper, right? We're bringing in the new age. Or is this more symbolic? Did they not even know truly what they were marking when they were doing it? Like, there's a lot that I just wonder about what was the purpose of all of this. That is a little odd for sure.
Yeah, I think I don't think there was cohesion to most of this. I just think it was, let's just have the most offensive, anti-Christian, anti-uptight people images that we can conjure. And yet it is begging God's judgment. And I think that that's the part that, we need to pray for the folks that are putting this together, because God will not be mocked, right? Those who sow in the flesh will reap corruption, and those who sow in the spirit will reap everlasting life. The whole idea that the rainbow has been co-opted by this community is a request for God's judgment. The rainbow was a sign God gave to say, I won't destroy the world this way again because of the mass sin and violence across the planet. But it was a sign of, I won't do it this way, but also a reminder that I did destroy in the past. And then we have prophecy of God's coming destruction that they're inviting. They're entering into the apocalypse with these images of the horse. And of course, this is when God will rain down his judgment and pour out the vials upon the earth. And they're almost begging him to do it. And what they're really trying to say, I think, is like that old college professor who says, if God really exists, I'm going to drop this pencil and I want him to stop it from falling. Well, God will not be mocked, and you will be judged. But it does show the arrogance of the sinner, and the absolute just trying to prove that they know that there is no God and there is no repercussion for my sin. But at the same time, if they didn't really care about God and his judgments, they wouldn't be concerned about borrowing these images and mocking them. It really shows in my mind that God is still pricking their hearts and convicting them for their sin. And so the response to that, rather than repentance, is a flamboyant mockery of God. And this, in my mind, is a preview of hell. When we think of hell and we look at, oh gosh, torment for that long, what if people would repent? Would God let them out? And the answer is they would never repent. The heart will continue in its rebellion, even in the midst of judgment. And I think that that's what we're going to see. Of course, it was fitting in my mind for France to be the country to host something so horrible, because France re-identified itself completely as an anti-Christian nation after its revolution. And it has really kind of been projecting that rebellion of Christian foundation since. So the West, I think, was offended. In fact, I think the Orthodox Church was offended. It was helpful to have a global rebuke of this, and yet very few people allowed it to keep them from watching the games and watching concluding ceremonies. And it does prove that Americans and the world, to some degree, are really addicted to entertainment. And unless we're willing to say, I don't need that in my life, and it's not about a boycott to prove a point. It's just about saying, I'm not going to give my attention and my funding to things that hate my faith and are seeking to destroy my faith. And I really think it's important that Christians take some stands on these things. And yes, you will miss out on some of the world's entertainment. But the reality is, if you go to the fathers and you look at the history of how they viewed a lot of the entertainment of ancient Rome, this is not a new problem. So anyway, that's kind of my thought of it.
Well, I think all of it was the display was a depiction of even I think Romans 1 is really what it's at, because I have a couple articles. I don't know if you saw some of these. So like, first off, there was this one that says that the new Olympic guidelines say that referring to trans athletes as either biologically male or biologically female is harmful. And so they say, like, their big quote is, a person's sex category is not assigned based on genetics alone, and an aspect of a person's biology can be altered when they pursue gender affirming medical care. And they said that listing somebody as either biologically male or biologically female is problematic language. So we're already at a point, even in the whole culture of it, to where we don't want to even believe that there's distinction anymore, right? That it can be what you want it to be. You can, if you take steps to do it, you can completely change. So we don't like that. And that's a complete rebellion of just genetics, really. I mean, to say that you cannot truly ever change yourself to do this. You can't. You cannot. It's not like taking a pill and you go from one to the next. Here's the other one that I thought was really fascinating, which is This is also the president of the International Committee says that what was his big quote here is, I've explained before the issues before that we have, and it's not an easy, and some of these cultural wars may not portray it that an XX or an XY is the clear distinction between men and women. This is scientifically not true anymore. And therefore, these two are women, and they have the right to participate in women's competition. This has nothing to do with inclusion in any way. So he's talking about when the outrage over the two men that beat the snot out of the women and took gold medals in boxing. That he is saying, I love this line that he said, it just shows us how insane we are. And also this whole trust, my religion is science, the science is going to lead. Look at this one. This is not scientifically true anymore. So we have deemed science to be the end all answer to everything. And we have determined scientifically now that you cannot determine the difference between a man and a woman. XX and XY does not mean anything anymore to us. Fascinating.
Right. Yeah, and notice they don't like to use the term male and female because those are more biological terminologies. And what it still reminds me of how we got a Supreme Court justice, the first Black woman to the court, who doesn't know how to define the word woman.
Yeah.
And it was kind of one of these strange situations where, like, well, then how do we know you qualify as the first? I guess it's because you identify, and it's just, well, couldn't anybody identify at any time? And then they're trying to establish rules, but the reality, I actually posted something and didn't get a lot of follow, and so because I don't want to be misunderstood, I deleted it. But I actually said, and without even seeing anyone else, my thought was, why are women boxing? So part of the whole thing about bringing women into a sport that is a historically male type sport is already feeding what we just saw take place. We're asking women to behave as men, and when they do so, it waters down the ability to even say, well, men can do everything that women can do everything that men can do. Really, is there any difference? And I did actually read articles later on saying women shouldn't box because their craniums are not as thick as men's. There is a number of things with concussion protocols that are much harder with women because they are more inclined to get concussions. And so even God's design says this shouldn't be a sport that women are subject to. But with the opening ceremony and highlighting what we've talked about with the rainbow community, is it a surprise that this was the ceremony, the Olympics, where it just on display, people identifying as XX, even their XY, because that's how we used to define men and women. And I understand there's intersex and there's some legitimate people born with legitimate both male and female parts, and you do have a medical classification for that. These aren't new questions that we're dealing with. The issue now is saying that there's no real difference. Isn't it strange that the two people that have this unique situation won? Does that not say something in itself? And then they had to disqualify, knock one of them, had to knock the other out for the gold. And now they're trying to prosecute anyone who spoke about this in other countries because they're going to change how we think about these things one way or another. But the reality is we know the difference between men and women. We know the difference between orientation and sin and what God's called us to. So I guess as we got some time, my question is, what do we do as believers in light of this kind of a world that we find ourselves in? Is there anything that we can do that we're not already doing, or do we just kind of sit back and watch the judgment of the world on display?
I think this should force Christians to go back and just view, like you and I have said many times, we do so much without thinking theologically, right? Like, what do we believe the scriptures teach about the roles of men and women? And should we, just because we're in America or we're in the West that says there's no distinction, anybody can do anything, is that necessarily true? And so begin to look at, like, what does the Bible teach about the roles of a husband and a wife, the roles of men and women, and begin with that, because I'm with you. These have forced new questions that, like, I just saw one even today. there was a discussion that was online of in light of the previous assassination attempt on Donald Trump. There was a postponement. I don't know if you saw this. There's a postponement of an event that came up, and part of the reason why it was postponed was because one Secret Service agent was supposedly left her post to go nurse her child. And there were two questions to that. First off is why would that even happen? And then other discussion is why would we have women, protecting, especially nursing mothers, protecting, somebody like that should not be the role. Like if you're going to throw yourself in front, the last thing is those are the people who should not be doing this at all. And that's not a sexist thing to say. That's you look at biblically what it was. It was the men who went out, right? Like we should look at that. We should look at what are the qualifications too for what, and not just that men would go out. Like there were even specific qualifications of when they were out, what they had to do, when they had to stay home, all of that kind of stuff, right? And some of that had to do with civic duty and family duty. But like, I think in all of this, it should just make us say, do I really truly even know where the Bible is on this? Not what I think it should be, or because I think all of us function from a very Christian cultural framework, especially if we grown up in the church. This is what we assume, this is what we think, this is what was passed on to us. And go back to say, what do we truly see in the scriptures so that we can make clear lines, right? Because the lines are blurred beyond belief now. And we need to have strong, clear lines of what do we truly see is that. There might be some critique of our current Christian cultural view of how we've shaped it to be that need to come, but the text itself needs to be the one that gives us the viewpoint of how to interpret and understand all of this, and not just how I feel or what the culture should say, what the culture is saying.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. We have to go to the Bible and be changed by what it says, and not assume that the church I grew up in or the status quo of 20 years ago was good enough. And I think that that's a big problem. A lot of people are like, well, when I was growing up, it was like this. Well, when you were growing up, it was probably already down a trajectory that was not biblical. And we need to go back a little further and start laying out some things that are going to help us kind of rebuild and rethink. And there is a lot of freedom, I think, in a lot of these issues. And when we go through it, we try to be balanced about these things. But when it's just normal for women to grow up in the sport of boxing, I don't think that's right, and we need to be able to challenge that as well as say, yeah, men shouldn't be fighting women. That's a given, right? But even so, women shouldn't be fighting women. And we need to kind of say, all right, should women serve? And I've addressed this. I wanted to do one of our OTXNTs on women serving in the armed forces. If all women run the risk of being in combat zones, then they're running the risk of dying for their country. And I think a lot of Christians view they're not in combat, so it's okay. But if they're going to be in combat zones, and I've been down and seen the names of many women on walls at Fort Huachuca and at Luke Air Force Base, and it doesn't sit right with me ever when that is something that our society is applauding. And many churches would say, this is wonderful. Our young lady is going to go do this. Women have a role, and we have to be really careful to how we define it, but we're so afraid to say, maybe there would be something better. Maybe it would be wonderful if you could do something that would allow you not to risk your life for the nation. And you could still maybe contribute, maybe have access to a revenue, support your family. But we want your husbands to die for you, not you to die for your husbands. And when you find out widowers who husband and wife were both in the service and the woman died and he's taking care of the kids, something is out of sorts. And that's not, of course, there's exceptions that happen in life, but when those are becoming kind of normal stories, we're off track. And I think the church needs to speak to these things. So, my thought with this is have some guts and have some just discipline to say, if something's going to mock my faith, I'm just going to not give them my attention or my money. I'll go pray, go do something more productive with your time and with your entertainment. And then if we're seeing mass shifts in the worldview that we're in, we need to address those with scripture, and we need also to protect our little ones from seeing this as normal. And that means we need to be really careful about who we allow to have influence on our kids. And as husbands who have influence on our wives, we have to look after them too.
100%, man. I want to kind of wrap this up. I know that we've got to go, but I mean, I keep coming back to some of the things that you see that were on display, right? Of this, you look and you see, I think that from the very beginning of here's what they did to put on display, to the decisions that were being made, to the policies that are being set, to the way that they promote the lifestyle of what they even want for their athletes. Romans 1:24, therefore God delivered them over to the desires of their hearts, to sexual impurity, so that their bodies were degraded among themselves. They exchanged the truth of God for a lie and worshiped and served what has been created instead of the Creator, who is praised forever. And then it goes on, right? It says, for this reason, God delivered them over to disgraceful passions. Their women exchanged natural sexual relationships for unnatural ones. The men in the same way also left natural relations with women and were inflamed with their lust for one another. Men committed shameless acts with men, received their own persons the appropriate penalty for their error. And they didn't think it was worthwhile to acknowledge God. God delivered them over to a corrupt mind so that they do what is not right. And I think about that even on display, and even in their decision making, they are completely flipped into. We've exchanged even in roles of what is to be done, decisions that are to be made, and we will not even reflect that we see there is differences in men and women in sport. Like it's just insane. And so I think that all kind of ties it up, right? The ceremony in a way was not that far off from what they are trying to do, on behind the scenes in terms of how they're running it. It's quite crazy. So, man, that's all I got though. I think there's a lot of little details to pick up. None of that thing is, and I will say this, last thing I want to say to this, I think this ties in from last year with the whole Target business. Symbols and imagery mean something.
Yes.
And I don't think that things that make it to marketing, things that make it to TV at a certain level like that, are just in error or they didn't know. I think there's a lot that goes on in our culture today. When they're in hot water, you pretend as if you were just ignorant. But I do think symbols mean something. And I think we have to pay very close attention to the symbols that we see, because they're chosen for a reason. And what does that mean? What are you trying to depict? And there might be an enigma to some of that because it's a symbol. But we need to pay attention to the symbols that are being used. And what's being thrown out there. I don't think look, there's millions of YouTube videos you could go through and they look at symbolism that people in music videos and all of that. And I think there's something legit to say to even the artistry of a culture and a people. It's there and some of it's hidden, but it's still there. And they're throwing it in there for a reason. You just got to ask why. Why is that there? So, and I think we saw the why. It was there on display because this is what truly has made up how they're making rules now, how they're trying to go forward, what this is going to look like. It's pretty, they've charted their own course in their own image, and even their science, which is the God of the, what they say is the God of our culture. It's that famous line from Nacho Libre, I don't believe in God, I believe in science, right? Even their science has shifted to where the guy says that's not even we can't even say that's the case anymore. So yeah, I think it all ties together from beginning to end.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I don't have anything more to say on it. These are the kind of things that we should respond to, and it should have upset us, and it should also let us know what we're up against. I was encouraged. I would say if there's one thing that's positive, the global outcry from Christians was refreshing.
Yeah, and the response. I think have you seen the athletes worshiping, some of the videos of the Christian athletes who have come out together worshiping together and things like that's the incredible stuff. And that's what I feel bad about some of these guys is you got some solid just Christian athletes who are there to compete.
Yeah.
but they're coming to compete in in something that's just it's a little wild for sure.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I do think that Christians are getting more vocal about their faith and about things in response to this, which I think is really good. So, we'll see. I think there's a real spiritual war going on. And so let's just keep praying and doing what we can. You want to close this out?
Yeah, I'll say this, just
Yeah.
as we're throwing, I threw out one book that I've been reading. I read up the Jonathan Cahn, which is the Return of the Gods. One book I just finished that had a lot to do with some of the discussion that we had. I think it's more pertinent to even more stuff in our own culture. Vodi Bakum just had a book come out about maybe 2 months ago. It's called "It's Not Like Being Black," and he highlights the civil rights movement, but how it's been the blueprint that really all sorts of craziness that has come today has hijacked what was trying to come out of what was trying to be of the good that came from the civil rights movement, that it's been hijacked and now it's gone into a free-for-all and it's kind of like why we're in some of the place that we're in today. And so I would highly recommend that. It's a very good read. It's a solid, it's a troubling read. It's not one that you you want to read with kids or anything like that. It's hard to take in, but it's a really good look at everything of how we got to where we got to, and why it's just picked up speed in our culture, because it's hijacked a movement. So interesting. I think it ties into some of that. Just finished that one today, so I can't speak highly enough about it though. All right, you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, let's close out the right way. May the Lord bless you and protect you. May the Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. May the Lord look with favor on you and give you peace. All right, take care,
Amen.
guys. Thank you. Talk to you
All right.
later. Bye-bye.
Bye.